Today, we're digging into the incredible, and let's be honest, often controversial, story of a really ancient text, the Atharvaveda. Now, for thousands of years, we've known it as the fourth Veda of Hinduism. But what if I told you that for centuries, its very place as a Veda was a huge debate? Okay, let's get into it. You heard that right. It's a genuine historical puzzle. You see, if you look through the massive library of ancient Indian literature, many of the oldest, most authoritative texts talk about the Vedas, but they only ever mention 3 of them. And that created this huge question mark that has fascinated scholars for ages. Where was the 4th? So we're diving right into the heart of the controversy. Was the sacred canon always a trio, or was there always a 4th member of the group? You know, the answer isn't nearly as straightforward as you might think.
Now check this out. This quote is from the Ayurveda, a super respected ancient text. It says, 3 Vedas were born, not 4, 3. This idea, which is known as the Veda Treyi or the Vedic Triad, is a really powerful piece of evidence for the people who argue there were only 3.
This page from our source material really lays out the thinking behind it. The argument went something like this. The first 3 Vedas, the Rig, the Sama, and the Yajur, were absolutely essential for the big fire sacrifices, the yajna. Each one had a very specific job. The Atharvaveda's role, well, it was different. So in texts that were laser-focused on the mechanics of that ritual, it just got left out. And that, of course, brings us to the million-dollar question. If so many early texts just ignore it, how on earth did it become so firmly established as the 4th Veda? Well, this is where our little investigation starts to get really interesting. Let's look at the other side of the coin.
Okay, so now we're putting on our detective hats. We're on the hunt for clues in other ancient sources. Clues that not only prove the Atharvaveda is just as old, but also confirm its sacred status.
And what do we find? Well, the evidence is pretty overwhelming. While that Veda tree idea was definitely used in certain contexts, a ton of other ancient texts are crystal clear. They don't just talk about 3 Vedas, they explicitly name 4. So that idea of 3, it was more of a functional grouping for a specific purpose, not the definitive list of all sacred texts. And the list of ancient shoutouts is impressive. You've got the Gopatha Brahmana, which is directly linked to the Atharvaveda, so of course it's going to champion it. But then you have others like the Mundaka Upanishad, and even Panini, the absolute legend who basically wrote the rules for Sanskrit around the 5th century BCE. He mentions it too. Let's zoom in on that one, because his reference is a game changer. So this is what makes Panini's reference so important. He didn't just know about some text called the Atharvaveda. Get this, he knew about its different schools, its different branches or Shakhas. That is a massive piece of evidence. It proves that by his time, this wasn't some new, weird text on the fringes. It was an established, widespread body of knowledge with its own distinct academic traditions.
And that idea of schools brings us to another layer of this whole mystery. You see, saying the Atharvaveda is actually a bit misleading. We aren't talking about a single book. We're really talking about a whole family of texts.
9. That's the number. Ancient commentators tell us that there were once 9 distinct versions, or schools, of the Atharvaveda. Each Shaka, was a slightly different version of the text, passed down through its own unique line of teachers and students.
And out of those 9, only a couple have survived in a major way. The Chanakya version, that's the one you're most likely to find printed today. But manuscripts of another incredibly important one, the Paipalata, have been discovered and painstakingly pieced together. As for most of the others, they're now just names lost to time.
And this right here just shows you the incredible detective work that goes into this. This table from our source lists those ancient schools. You see, the story of the Atharvaveda is also a story about saving knowledge, about scholars finding scattered pieces of manuscripts in libraries all over the world, from Kashmir and Pune to Paris, Oxford, and Berlin, and bringing a lost world back to life.
Okay, so we've established it's ancient, and it's legit, but what's actually in the Atharvaveda that made it so controversial in the first place? Well, that brings us to its famous reputation for magic and sorcery.
Yeah, let's just be direct about it. For a lot of people, especially after 19th century European scholars got a hold of it, the Atharvaveda got branded as a book of spells, Jadutona as it's called in Hindi. It was seen as this collection of primitive charms for everything from finding a partner to cursing your enemies. And honestly, that reputation has really stuck. Is that the whole story? Not even close. To just slap a magic label on the entire text is to miss almost everything that makes it so amazing. So what else is hiding in there?
You see, the Atharvaveda has this incredible dual personality. On one hand, yes, it has hymns for everyday life, for health, for a long life, for protection, but on the other hand, it's a deep, profound source of early scientific thought. In fact, it's widely considered to be one of the foundational texts for Ayurveda, the traditional Indian science of medicine and life. Our source here points out that the great reformer Maharshi Dayananda even called Ayurveda the Upaveda, like a subsidiary Veda that comes directly from the Atharvaveda. And this isn't just some vague wellness advice. The text gets incredibly specific. For instance, the third hymn of the very first book describes a procedure for treating urinary diseases and stones. It talks about a method, sometimes called basti chikitsa, that uses a shara, which is like a reed or a probe, to clear the urinary passage. I mean, think about that. It's a stunningly precise description of what sounds like a medical intervention, proving this Veda contains not just prayers, but early surgical knowledge.
So, after we clear away all the controversies, all the stereotypes, what is the real legacy of this incredible text? What's the big takeaway from its story?
All right, let's do a quick recap. First, we discovered that its place as the fourth Veda, while, yeah, it was debated, is totally confirmed by a ton of ancient sources. Second, it's not one book, but a whole family of traditions. Third, its content is so much richer than just magic. It's a foundation for Ayurveda and science. And finally, its entire history is this powerful lesson in how knowledge can survive, get lost, and then be brought back into the light. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. The story of the Atharvaveda. It isn't just about the past. It's about us, today, learning to look past simple labels to find a much deeper truth. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? In our age where we have so much information at our fingertips, how much other knowledge is still out there, just hiding in plain sight, waiting for us to rediscover it and understand what it's truly about.